Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to the final episode of Season 1 of From the Ashes, a podcast where every episode ignites hope and healing. Today, I interviewed my college dance crewmate, Joey Kim. Growing up in a violent, repressive environment, Joey found sanctuary in martial arts and street dance, using them to heal PTSD and anxiety through artistic, physical expression. Joey's ways of articulating his experiences and navigating his trauma are profoundly introspective, and I am honored that we are able to share these insights with you. Enjoy this heartfelt conversation with Joey Kim.
The fire in the darkest night, a phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame that ignites. All
right, hey everyone, welcome back to From the Ashes. Today, I have my good friend Joe Kim with me. We go way back to our college days at Northwestern University, where we were both part of a hip hop dance crew called Refresh Dance Crew. And I have seen Joe just tremendously transform throughout the years, and he has witnessed my transformation as well. And it's just really cool to be here with someone who understands me deeply. So thank you, Joe, for being here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. I want to start off kind of by telling the audience our story with Refresh Dance Crew. This is kind of an origin story with so much that has led both of our lives, because we've both turned this like hip hop and this dance into a healing modality, right? So yeah, let's start with that.
Yeah, sure. So Fuego. First of all. And yeah, I remember, I think how I found Refresh was, it was my freshman year. It was like, I think sometime in it was really early. It was like first quarter. And I stepped into, I think it was SPAC gym. And yeah, you guys were just going off. Matt was doing his thing, breaking. I think that some of you guys were also doing choreo. And I saw you definitely hitting those sharp angles like you always do. And I was like, wow, dude, this is the real deal. This is like what I saw, as a kid, like on music videos on TV. And I was trying to imitate in the basement where nobody was watching. But like you guys were like accessible. So I just went up to you guys, talked to you guys. And you guys were just very inviting. And that's pretty much my story. I mean,
yeah. Well, yeah. I want to give people a bit of background and before your time even, because I think you came in when I was a junior or something like that, right?
Yeah, junior, senior. So okay. you definitely were earlier on. Yeah.
It's really funny because when I got into Northwestern, I didn't know how to breakdance and I was terrible at hip hop. And my goal was to learn how to break. Mm-hmm. And it was just so weird because Matt and I happened to live in the same dorm, I think even on the same floor of freshman year. And he just so happened to want to also start a club of people who want to learn how to break. And so it was so like ground up, grassroots, because there were other hip hop groups on campus, but I wasn't good enough for that. And it was really just kind of this curiosity that I had. And that's really what started all of this Refresh stuff, which has turned into a huge campus-wide phenomenon at this rate. Has supported now generations of dancers. So we had really humble beginnings. And I think because of that, we were very humble to begin with and very hungry to learn. And it was a very creative space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it just opened up a lot organically, I think, because it was that space for people to come in and process themselves in a different way. Looking back at it now, at least.
Yeah. I agree. Like, and I definitely felt like the grassroots like nature of it. I think that's what like really gravitated towards like me. Cause like, I could identify with you guys. You guys were, fellow Asian Americans and also, fellow nerds. Like we're all at Northwestern here, but also just like, there's also this side of us that like had like, I don't know, maybe some like empowerment issues, maybe. I mean, at least on my end, that's what I felt. And, hip hop, like what better way to empower yourself than through hip hop?
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, it was just, it's almost like I like unconsciously like manifested you guys, and you unconsciously manifested refresh, like by, somehow finding a way to meet with Matt and the rest of the crew. So to create refresh. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So let's jump into that story of
yeah,
those empowerment issues. And I've talked about this on the podcast, so I'll just kind of briefly go over it and then I'll invite you to tell your story.
sure,
But I was always a very quiet kid growing up. I didn't have that many friends up until maybe junior high school, with English being my second language and just not being able to relate to people
hmm,
um, from different cultures or the
yeah,
main culture even. And dance has always been an outlet. I started with Chinese folk dance. And when I got into middle school was when I switched schools, and all of a sudden there were all these Asian American kids doing hip hop and breaking, and they were so cool. I
mm,
didn't fit in with them, but like it
yeah,
was just really nice because they did accept me to an extent, and they did introduce to me a lot of Asian pop music. Hip hop was huge back in the day because it was the 90s, 2000s. And yeah, like, and I've always been very drawn to that physical expression of emotion, of thoughts and whatnot. So when I helped create Refresh and I was going through all of this, I was realizing like, yeah, I can have my voice. But because I was so young in that process, that voice was very explosive. And so that really, it was a very volatile time, I think, college. Because of that, I was like discovering my own voice and trying to process that. So
yeah.
giving you that context and how I got into and how I process it, I invite you also to tell your story of how.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I can definitely relate. I don't know how deep we want to go, but probably start a little higher level for now. But yeah. I mean, I grew up in like a very kind of rigid Korean like family, like conservative Christian Korean family, very violent family. Unfortunately, there was a lot of just violent abuse going on, and that violence and that kind of repression, it just led to a lot of like bottled up like anger and emotions. And it's like the emotions that I was taught to express, like kind of unconsciously by the people around me, was like either like nothing or just like anger and rage, the whole K rage thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I was like a dork. I was pretty good in school and all that stuff. I worked hard, studied hard. I mean, such was the expectations of my family. But I was like kind of a Jekyll and Hyde, because I also like I hung out with a lot of like troublemakers, like troubled kids. Like somehow I just like really identified with them. I think because how I grew up. But yeah, like like I got into like hanging out with like some like ghetto wannabe kids, because I was kind of a thug wannabe. I mean, I guess all thugs are kind of wannabes, but it's just like, yeah, we just were like surrogate fathers for each other in some sense, surrogate like brothers. And like coming with that was also a big interest in hip hop. I remember seeing like hip hop dance like in music videos and be like, wow, that looks powerful. That looks empowering, like something that looks very expressive, and it looks like I can identify with the rage, with the power, all of it. But there was just nobody who was really like dancing like that, like where I grew up. So I mean, I remember trying like to learn a few different things. Like I think I learned how to do like a Nike freeze like on my own, which I was pretty happy about. But yeah, I guess from that environment, like there was always like an embedded interest in hip hop. There was a lot of anger and also a lot of violence, which led to, I guess, a certain gap and a certain sense of like numbness to like the subtleties, the finer, the softer things in life, like the connection, the sense of trust, it's the sense of safety. And hip hop seemed to, I guess, give me kind of an outlet or a sense of identity with that. And then I came to Northwestern, and so yeah, that's kind of the high level gist of things. So
Yeah.
no,
Okay. Do you mind if I ask a question
yeah,
based off of
sure.
my previous observations of you during college?
Yeah.
So I remember when you first came in, you were working on like windmills,
Uh-huh.
and like variations of windmill, right?
Yeah.
Really hard stuff. And you would
Uh-huh.
like go hard at it,
Oh yeah.
sometimes to the point of injury.
Yeah.
And I think in the back of my mind, I've always thought of that image of you and like just like it was like you were trying to spin out some kind of
Mm.
pain. What was going on when you were doing those windmills? Like, what were you processing?
Yeah, it's very interesting that you're bringing that up because I've recognized it as a habit like in the past. So basically, when it comes to very like violent traumatic experiences, you sort of unconsciously become numb to like feelings in your body. And particularly I was like pretty numb to pain and just like numb to my body in general because it was just like some of the crazy shit that I went through. And yeah, it's like working myself really hard to the point that it like hurt was like actually a way for me to like finally feel something in my body.
Hmm.
And like feeling something is better than feeling nothing. I mean that's how my psyche was at the time. And yeah, I would go to the point of injury. I remember I like tore my meniscus, was like walking on campus in crutches. And I was still like coming to practice, like trying to work on freezes and even trying to do a little footwork, which is really dumb. But it was just like, I don't know, like it was definitely not like, it was in some sense, it was not healing. It
Right.
was bad for me. But in some sense, it kind of was because it was allowing me to like feel a sensation in my body.
Yeah.
Oh, this is pain. Oh, pain. Like I haven't really felt pain in a long time because I've, felt so much pain throughout my childhood, and eventually, like you kind of become numb to pain.
Yeah.
And so, like, oh, this is familiar, and it's like reactivating. It was like reactivating my body, and then, in a weird way, by injuring myself a bunch of times, I finally started to become more sensitive to my pain.
Mm.
And so it kind of backdoored my way into my healing and becoming more embodied. And yeah, it's also like the pain, it was just like me, like a lot of the anger and rage, just like putting it all on the dance floor,
Yeah.
you know? And yeah, like the anger that went into my body, it went in with pain.
Yeah.
And sometimes it has to come out with pain too, you know? I feel like that's kind of the first part of the journey.
Yeah.
So
We'll skip around a little bit
sure.
and we'll fill in the gaps as we go. But,
Mhm.
fast forward years and years later, because I know you've lived in New York. We've met up in New York a few times and
Oh yeah.
then like in LA. So when you were in LA, because I've seen so many clips of you online with like doing the calisthenics and all of that. And I feel like, when I started seeing you doing that, I was like, well, that's different. There was a shift in him. And that's when you really started talking very publicly about what you've been through.
Mm.
So can you tell us a story about how that shift started for you? And was there any point where there was like a ground zero or a realization that helped you through that shift?
I think it was gradual. So I got diagnosed with PTSD. I mean, I'm kind of hopping around here too. I got diagnosed with PTSD like my mid 20s. And, I was functional with PTSD because I still had, a great career, making good money, all that stuff. But there was something inside that like was just very, very like wrong. And, hypervigilance, like flashbacks and, terrifying nightmares and just like, a sense that like there's always something I got to watch out for. And I was just recognizing that inside me and I didn't know. And, like I was actually like completely unaware that I even had a bad childhood. I remember something that I would say a lot that I actually talked a lot with my friends. And I've talked with some of my old high school buddies, like where I would be like, oh yeah, my dad beat me with a baseball bat, but I deserved it. And I kind of just like brushed it off and I would like laugh it off. It's interesting. Like looking back, like it's like almost like the subconscious part of my psyche was like trying to process it by like talking to
Mhm.
people about it and like helping people like validate it. And it's like my inner child like wanted to be heard.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just a profound discovery that I have PTSD and like some shit did happen to me. It it was just such a profound like shift in my life. And then like I think the first part of the healing journey, the first part of like the it's realization, like realizing that I have this pain. The second part is like feeling all that pain, and it would like just feeling a lot of like bad shit, and they call it the dark night of the soul.
Hmm.
And then I eventually kind of like overcame that pain, and I started to feel safe in my body. The nightmares went away. Just like I felt like just grounded and whole. And for me, it was such a profound level of safety and peace. You don't know what you don't know, right? It's like if you've been living like feeling like you're unsafe your whole life, you think that's normal. You think being unsafe is actually safe.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I felt safe, and that safety, it emanated to feeling safe enough to talk about my experiences, to feel safe enough to like talk publicly. I was pretty shy. Like I wasn't, really talkative during our college days. Now I felt safe enough to just like express myself. Like my feelings matter. And when your feelings matter, you talk about your feelings, kind of the natural progression in life.
Yeah. Because, so you've been a coach, you founded Bliss Hop Healing.
Yeah.
So obviously hip hop and dance have been really instrumental for you in that healing journey.
Hmm.
How did that facilitate that process for you?
How did my experiences facilitate that process?
How did the hip hop and the dance help facilitate your healing?
Yeah, sure. Hip hop for me was special just because so dance, like moving my body, like I was always a very hyper energetic kid, like I just had so much energy. And, I think we naturally like want to express ourselves,
Mm.
right? And the expression that came naturally for me as a kid, because I just had a lot of it, was just anger and just rage. And for me, like, yeah, like I'm not look, like hip hop isn't all anger and rage, but it's one of hip hop is one of those beautiful things where it allows you to express your anger and rage. Whereas like there's certain other modalities, like that don't really give you that same level of outlet. And hip hop, at least for me, at least how I interpreted hip hop, was like it allowed you to express all parts of yourself, like both anger and bliss, both love and hatred. And there's no shame behind expressing those things. All things are valid to express. And for me, like that was special because there's other dance like modalities, and like the stereotypical LA healing dance. It's very like flowery, like, hey, I'm pretending to be Shakti, like, oh, like using very like feminine movements. And that, like, look, growing up how I grew up and what I went through, that would have never penetrated me
Mhm.
ever. And it still doesn't really penetrate me. I mean, look, I definitely have like learned to soften my movements and learn to embrace other types of movement. But the journey was like first like addressing like what is actually there, not like bypassing that and pretending to be like bliss when really what's inside me is anger and pain.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that hip hop like kind of gives you a way of not spiritually bypassing the true essence of your experience. For me personally,
Yeah. I mean, I would agree too. Hip hop has been very unique in history in that like it is very combative.
Hmm.
It's designed to be that way. And it comes from a
Yeah,
place where people had to be, right? Like
right.
and I really do love that this is an art form that really has embraced reality and all parts of reality. I'm not all
Hmm.
about the love and light either. I've just
Hmm.
seen too much. And
Yeah.
can you dig a little bit into that? What's like the importance of authenticity and what's the problem, you know, with just being flowery and flowy, right?
Yeah. The importance of authenticity. Well, it's on many different levels, right? Like for for me to enough, trust anybody enough to build a connection with them, there needs to be authenticity, because trust is built on off of authenticity. Relationships are built off of authenticity. Everything is built off of authenticity, you know, and that's paramount. And I guess, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Yeah. So where have you seen I guess my question is, where have
Where have I
you
seen?
witnessed the lack of authenticity and the impact of that?
Yeah. Yeah. And where have I seen the lack of authenticity and the impact of that? It's everywhere, right? There is an isolated place. So I think the truth is, like, we're all inauthentic to some degree, just based off of the fact that we all have pain, we all have traumas, we all have what we've been through. But the place that really, I guess, grinded my gears sometimes was the spiritual community, or even the healing community, like mental health communities. I mean, look, mental health and everything and wellness, it's all been on the rise. But I think that's really where the gap in authenticity is where it shouldn't be. Particularly in LA, like I live in Santa Monica, a lot of, like, you know, it's like very influencery and very like yoga and kombucha and Pilates on the weekend. And, people go to meditation retreats and everything very regularly. But what I feel oftentimes is people use spiritual terms, people use terms like love and light as a form of avoidance of what they're actually experiencing deep inside them. So we all naturally want to feel like love and light. And the truth is, like, we are, like, in our deepest forms, love and light. That's what I believe. But what's in the way of that is a lot of darkness. And until you acknowledge that darkness, until you fully acknowledge that pain, you don't get to actually experience your love and light fully. Yeah. That's what I feel. Like love, light, all these, like, great spiritual terms. It's an experience, right? It's like this. The word honey is not the same thing as honey, right? Honey has a taste. Honey has a color, a texture. It feels a certain way. It looks a certain way. And you don't really understand it until you actually taste it. Like, you put it in your mouth, you look at it, you feel it in your hands. It's a feeling. Mm-hmm. I mean, I could describe it. I could say, oh, it's really sweet. It's golden. It's this, it's that. But until you actually see it, feel it, and taste it, you're not really going to understand what honey actually is. It's just a bunch of words, and words are not the actual experience, and that's the difference between thinking and feeling. Thinking is a lot of words, it's that voice in our head, and feeling is experience. And healing is in the feeling, nothing more, nothing less.
Hmm. It reminds me of, do you watch Star Wars?
I have.
Okay. Yeah. The recent iterations of Star Wars because it used to be like Jedi light, and then the dark side. And I think we have been taught to look at light side and dark side as these, like, opposing forces. But in the recent, shows, it really goes into that theme of, like, if you don't acknowledge the dark, it will come and eat you up. And, and there's like love within, also in the dark, which I find to be very refreshing, because I feel like we can't really live in the illusion that there's a good side and evil side anymore.
Yeah. Well, I feel that the dark became the dark because we didn't acknowledge it. And that's why it became our shadow. It's like my anger, my pain, I didn't acknowledge it. So it became something inside me that ultimately culminated into PTSD. Mm-hmm. And then the part of my healing journey was then acknowledging that PTSD. So shining light on the darkness. So what you suppress always becomes shadow, you know?
Yeah. What led up to the diagnosis of PTSD? Were you noticing things that were happening in your body, or like, because like you had to go to a doctor to get that diagnosis, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was a lot of things. I mean, I was experiencing a lot of health issues, and I was in a pretty stressful like finance career. I used to be an investment banker, and would work pretty late. So a lot of that was unhealthy lifestyle for sure. But it's just like I was in my mid-20s, and I was like I had like fibromyalgia, like I gained like 30, 40 pounds. I was like having like the onset of arthritis like symptoms.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Like I'm pretty athletic now, but it's like I couldn't really do anything with my body. And different doctors were telling me like, hey, like, the only physical activity you can do is like really like, what grandmas do, like, kind of like light yoga on the weekends or stuff like that. Very low impact stuff. And I was just experiencing a lot of like anger and like fear, like irrational fear. Just like I would be at work and I was just like very sensitive to noises, like kind of angry, and I would just like erupt and be like, what the fuck is that? Like, and everybody's like, what are you talking about? It's just somebody like dropped a shoe or something. Somebody dropped a feather. Like, and it just would like, I don't know, it's just like the sensitivity to noises was just intense. And then I was having like these like dreams and these nightmares and these just like very volatile relationships. And my belief is that when it comes to like our healing journey, like the very first step is like, we all point the finger and other things like, oh, like it's because that person dropped that little feather that made that light noise that, you know what I mean? Oh, it's because that person did this. Oh, it's because, you point the finger elsewhere, but you keep experiencing pain in your life and keep experiencing disappointment until eventually you have to start looking inside yourself,
Yeah. And
I was like, okay, there's something wrong. It's clearly not everything. And then, like that's when I went to see, a mental health professional and it's like, yeah, it sounds like PTSD. So that's how it started.
So I want to ask you this because I think you would understand.
Mm-hmm.
There comes a point in the time of someone's healing journey where we realize that we are responsible. That doesn't mean that other people have not done us wrong, but we are responsible for our own lives. What does that mean to you?
Yeah. This means like victimhood is not the same thing as healing. Victimhood is often misconstrued with healing, right? And, we're in a volatile age. I might be a little controversial here, but like, there's a strong sense of identity behind being a victim. But my feeling is that that's the first stage of healing. Like all of a sudden you start to experience all these things that you suppressed deep inside yourself. So you feel like you're a victim, but then and oftentimes what I feel is like people on their healing journey, like we get stuck on that first stage of like, I'm a victim. I'm the one who's being hurt by everybody else. And then the next stage is, like you said, starting to take responsibility, and people tend to be afraid of the word responsibility. We have images of David Goggins and some like very like macho, like masculine stuff. And that's not what I mean. Like responsibility is, you can be responsible and yet compassionate. I call it compassionate responsibility. And, it's like taking responsibility is basically acknowledging that, hey, you have been hurt. You have been through pain, at a point in your life when you were a child, when I was a child, when I wasn't able to, be fully responsible for my emotions, my actions. And, it's like your consciousness as a child, is naturally focused more on absorption, right? You absorb what's around you because it's a survival mechanism. As a child, you absorb. But as an adult, you have this thing called choice. And that's the evolution of consciousness. You're conscious with choice. You're aware of things, and the very virtue of being aware allows you to choose how to respond. And that insight allows you to start taking responsibility for your actions, for your behaviors, your whatever, and ultimately even your emotions, your feelings, your sense of identity, your sense of being. Who am I as Joey? But that insight really only comes from actually acknowledging your pain. And so that's how I see responsibility. It's basically learning to realize how powerful you actually are. Learning to realize that like you're in control of your entire experience, yeah, to the extent of how conscious and aware you are.
That's amazing. That's very well said. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Because we've both been such explosive people.
Yeah.
I'll share on my end. Like it's like over 10 years now. I think it's like 15 years since I graduated Northwestern. And even up until maybe like last year or the year before, this emotional reaction to things would come up like very frequently. And, I remember when I first started dating my husband, I would get social anxiety attacks, like panic attacks, because like I couldn't go into certain spaces and not shrink down. And I started to process this concept of being responsible. And I think the more that I allow myself to process it and see that like I have more choice than I realized, I can choose everything, that has really allowed me to have more equanimity in situations where I used to explode. Yeah. But it's an ongoing process. I don't think we're ever going to be 100%, but like I've noticed for myself, at least in the past couple of years, it's significantly shifted.
That's wonderful. And I've actually witnessed that too. Like you're definitely like, you're like a lot like more calm. Yeah. And it's a testament to your work and your maturity.
So thank you for that.
Yeah,
and
of course.
I feel acknowledged. I feel seen. Thanks.
Absolutely.
How do you hold space for people who are still in the very beginnings of that journey?
That's a very interesting question. I think the most important thing is like first and foremost is being a very good listener. Oftentimes when people go into the business of holding space for people, like healing, everybody and their mother in LA, like says that they're a healer and they're a coach and all this stuff. Guilty. And, but oftentimes it's, our subconscious, it has a certain ego attachment, an ego identity behind, oh, I'm a healer. I help people. But when it comes to holding space and healing, your ego has to not be there. You're just a channel for the person. Mm-hmm. You have to be a good listener. You have to feel that person and really just reflect what they're saying. I think that's the most fundamental aspect. Like the key is feeling, feeling the person and feeling, listening. All that happens in like silence, so I'd say that's the biggest part of holding space. And the biggest part of holding space, even before that, like to do all that stuff, you need to first like fully hold space for yourself. And I think sometimes people in LA, and just people in the healing world in general are too quick to want to heal and help other people. And I think sometimes it's very important to look at what is that thing inside you that wants to like hold space for other people. Sure, I'm sure there's a part of you that really genuinely wants to help people, but there's also a part of you that probably has a certain ego attachment behind that. And also there's probably, I'll be fully transparent for myself. I definitely had that I went through that myself. There was a certain ego attachment behind being maybe like helping people, holding space for people. And there's also just like, sometimes wanting to help people, it comes from a codependent energy, where it's like codependence is like you are loving somebody because it fills the gap in your own heart.
Mm-hmm.
Like it validates your own existence. And when you're helping somebody, because when you're doing something that is selfishly motivated, in the sense that like it means self-esteem for you, because you without it don't have self-esteem, and that subtly impacts like the ability to hold space, the ability to truly be there for somebody. And it goes in a very, very deep, like intracellular, like energetic level.
Yeah.
That, look, I mean, I don't think it's anything to be shamed, like your desire to help people. I think it's actually something to be celebrated and loved. But I think it's also, it's something to be not taken very lightly and to be deeply examined within yourself. Right now, like, we have healers that are like shaman and all this stuff, which is great. And they're kind of the alternative to therapists. And therapists, look, I mean, a lot of people kind of maybe shit on the whole mental healthcare industry in general because of, how much money people are making and all this stuff. But yeah, like it's true, like mental health, a lot of the issues with mental health and therapy is like, it's very in your head and it's not kind of like in your body. And, but the biggest issue is sometimes a lot of therapists, they learned how to hold space and heal from a textbook.
Yeah.
And they haven't had the direct experience of healing themselves.
Yeah.
And, that's a big issue with the world of mental health, but that's also an even bigger issue in the world of like shamanism, yoga, meditation, Buddhist retreats, Reiki healing, the whole 9 yards. So.
Well, I mean, I think that's why you get so many corruption cases of people abusing their
absolutely
stuff,
Like a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Great example of that is like, in the world of breakdancing, it's like, if you haven't learned how to do a headspin, why the fuck are you teaching people how to do a headspin? Learning how, like doing a headspin, it's a felt experience. It's like you're getting used to the feeling in your head, like the nerves in your endings in your head, to a certain level of torque. Mm-hmm. You can't be like, hey, like you put 20 pounds of pressure here and like, you go at this 90-degree angle and you put 20 pounds of force on your leg, which makes you spin on your, no, that's in your head. It's a feeling.
Ooh. Ugh, I want to go on a tangent.
Go ahead.
I'm going to go on a little tangent, even though I love the discussion we're having now with the dance stuff. So, man. All right. So when we first started Refresh, we were really into like the shapes and stuff. And here's the thing, and I want to say this very gently because it can be very controversial, is that, as Asian American kids, we're not really taught to feel rhythm and to like groove. And so it was very comfortable for us to do the shapes, be like, and not think about this body thing. The embodiment of music and the embodiment of rhythm, it was very much like in the head, not the heart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not like we were causing us to be always in our head, but it just reflected, I think, just how we were all brought up because we were mostly Asian American kids. And the type of dance that we created was all that we knew.
Oh, yeah.
And it was just really cool to start exploring different people's dances, because once I actually learned how to groove and get rhythm, my whole way of changed.
Yeah. We were very mechanical. I remember 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that's not a perfect 90 degrees. But here's the thing. Like, I also think like it's one of those things where like I think sometimes you just have to go through that. Sometimes you have to like kind of like let your head be the head until your head's like, okay, I'm done being the head now. Now go into your heart. Like at least for me, that was like the evolution of my dance learning, where it was just all head. And then my head was like, okay, thank you for acknowledging me. Now I can let you also acknowledge the heart. And that's when the growth really happened, you know?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I wonder
yeah.
if it's any different now. I mean, because like they're so good now, you know, they're so good at
Yeah.
dancing now.
Oh, yeah. You can feel, I mean, I'm sure you can relate to this, but you can feel though, like somebody can be like a great technical dancer, and there's just a certain like subtle energetic feeling that's like not there.
Right.
And I don't know, like I think the dance community in LA, in the big cities, and also in different college campuses, it's beautiful. But like I think there's always ways to go a bit deeper, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, the commercial side of dance, like it kind of doesn't. First of all, like I don't know. I never really competed and all that. I mean, everybody says that I should compete, and for me, like it's just I've had enough competition in my life,
Yeah.
and you know, I want to feel into some other things, and yeah, you know, I think that that's an avenue that you can kind of go to, but I think there's always pros and cons.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like everybody's on their own growth journey, you know?
Yeah,
So it's always tempting to try to have your hand in other people's growth journeys, but they also have to be ready and like have their own experience. So
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. What modalities do you maintain right now, or what practices do you maintain right now to facilitate your ongoing healing and growth?
Yeah. So I still do therapy here and there. And, you know, therapy is helpful, especially if you find the right therapist. And for me, like what's been a very deep part of my journey is like meditation. And not like it's like the wacky meditations where you visualize and manifest and all these flashy meditations, just very simple kind of Buddhist style meditation where maybe you just sit up straight, close your eyes and focus on your breath. And the very act of closing my eyes, like it's like blocking off one sense that's completely dedicated to external.
Mm-hmm.
And so by closing my eyes, it immediately just goes internal. And by anchoring on something very simple, like the breath or maybe like a sensation in your heart, it allows, at least for me, like a lot of subconscious things show up, like in the form of like maybe feeling itch, maybe feeling like restless while I'm meditating, maybe feeling like tired or scared. But it's all like things that were kind of suppressed deeply in my subconscious, but you know, just living life, running around, being busy, you're just not aware of it. And for me, like, you know, meditation it's gotten very, very deep in that sense where, you know, I can kind of go in, feel into what's there and, you know, like almost like little by little bit, like dissolve the ego and, also get to that part of my consciousness which has choice, you know, choice to create space between stimulus and reaction. Right? Like, oh, I feel an itch. I feel all this anger. I want to like fucking get out and like just like start looking at my phone. Like, no, let's pause and let's just sit with that. And let's just notice it and observe that. And just like a lot of the insights I have with who I am as a person, like, you know, like I'm not the sensation in my body. I'm this thing called awareness. And this thing called awareness has different aspects to it. Like, your awareness can get very, very like focused on a small point to as expansive as like something like the whole universe. And, you know, it has a certain quality of like, you know, calmness versus like restlessness. And your awareness also has this beautiful quality of choice, you know, and so that insight has been very helpful. Dancing has been very helpful, of course, you know, for all the reasons we've mentioned. Yoga has been very helpful. And, you know, one of the biggest areas of my journey, has been, you know, using plant medicine. Mm-hmm. So everything from, psilocybin mushrooms to ayahuasca to, you know, ketamine, LSD, so on and so forth. So it's all been very, very helpful. Mm. And, for me, like plant medicine has been like kind of the deepest, most efficient way of getting through, particularly with like the PTSD symptoms.
Yeah.
So it basically helped me eradicate like the majority of the PTSD I was experiencing. in my early days. So yeah.
Do you mind if I ask a little bit about that? Because I feel
Yeah.
like
Go
even
ahead.
we live in LA, so everybody's all about the plant medicines and everything, but like
Hmm.
it's not mainstream yet. Tim Ferriss is very much advocating for it. There are different scientists who are researching it in institutions, and there is some buzz going around, but for most people, it is still very much not understood. Can you describe why that experience was so significant for you of using the plant medicines?
Yeah. So plant medicine, particularly psilocybin, has been very significant for me. Psilocybin, it's the part of the mushroom. It's basically a mushroom that grows naturally in the earth, and it's connected to. I'm probably not explaining this very well, but it's connected to like mycelium, and mycelium helps like facilitate communication between different trees, different plants, so on and so forth. And I say all this to say this. It's like you're kind of like this is what I feel when you're tapping into these plants, like you're tapping into their wisdom and their communication and their senses. And as humans, sometimes we're a bit cocky and we think that we have like all the senses that are out there, but there's senses that we don't have. Like bloodhounds are able to smell like 10 times what we're able to smell and feel things. So basically, for me, like plant medicines, it gave me like an extra sense because being so desensitized with my human senses due to a lot of the traumas, a lot of the violence I experienced, it's like I can keep going at trying to feel into those senses that are already really blocked. Whereas plant medicine was like, oh, well, you can try this other sense, this other like way of sensing the world and your body and the universe. And for me, like that's basically why plant medicine kind of helped me go deeper. It's also, I think particularly for things like psilocybin, it's great for doing shadow work. And I think shadow work is probably the most not understood part of healing, even though that like I would say it's probably the most important thing when it comes to healing. Because, it's basically your shadow is basically to explain shadow work in a nutshell. It's basically like, hey, going through traumas, going through life, you learn to suppress certain feelings and certain things. And what you suppress just kind of gets stored into your body and it becomes your shadow. Shadow because you're not shining your light of awareness on it.
Yeah.
And shadow work, it's often terrifying. It can be scary because all the things that you're scared to experience, it shows up. All the things that you're scared to acknowledge about who you are as a person, what's happened to you, and take responsibility for. It's scary. It's not flashy. It's oftentimes very unpleasant, and especially in certain plant medicines, like especially ayahuasca and like oftentimes psilocybin, like you purge, as you're shining light on that shadow. But it's like a crucial aspect of your healing, and that's why the plants like you don't understand light until you understand darkness.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like by definition, like light has a sense of understanding that's relative to darkness. And so, yeah, like for me, that's what plant medicine has done. So,
I want to dig a little bit into
yeah.
that. So with the shadow work, and how we create essentially layers of defensive mechanisms based off of limiting beliefs and traumatic experiences and whatnot. I'm creating this hand motion of an onion or like something where there's layers of this. In your own work, just like give me one example of one major layer of limiting belief you have shed in the recent years and how and what were the behaviors that shifted and how has that changed your trajectory?
Yeah. So one of the shadow areas is it's an unconscious belief that I'm not safe, that there's always danger that needs to be managed. Throughout my 20s and earlier on, like I would always have like, I'd be able to talk with you, interact with you, but there was always like at least 30-40% of my consciousness was focused on what could happen, or preparing for something that could happen in the future. So I was never like fully present, right? And it's like when you're not fully present, you don't see the opportunities that arise in the present moment, you know? And so a big part of the shadow work, like this particular aspect of the work, was, feeling into the lack of safety, like where it comes from, feeling the texture of it, where I feel it in my body. Like for instance, I would feel a lot of like tension, like right here. And I realized, because this is where, when I would get, beaten by my pops, like he was right-handed, and this was like the hand that would like go up and block, or I'd feel like tension in my neck, or I feel like this like weird like tension like right here in the back of my head, because sometimes my dad would do this thing where he could like hit the back of my head, and it's like, I don't know, I would always feel like that would be, I think unconsciously as a kid, like I would be like, that would be, it's like the hits that you don't see, and that would be what like would kill me eventually or something. Like, I don't know, just like you feel into all these things when you're a kid. And yeah, like the plant medicine helped me like kind of observe that and feel into that lack of safety in the body. And eventually, as it shed, as I kind of breathe space into it, it would eventually, like, it started to fade. And just by allowing myself to feel into the uncomfortable tension that I'm experiencing in the body, it started to go away. It started to just like flow, like energetically flow out of my body. And all of a sudden, like, it was weird. It's like, for the first time, like, I remember like being in that circle, and like, I just started crying, like, oh my God, I'm home. I'm home. Like, I just started like bawling my eyes out. And it's like, for the first time, I feel like fully present, which I've never been able to feel that before. And all of a sudden I feel like my heart opening up, like my there's like these subtle sensations in my heart. And I'm recognizing that, hey, like when I'm meeting somebody or when I'm talking to somebody, that blockage in my heart isn't there anymore. It's open, it's raw, and it's like inviting, as opposed to like, no, don't come here. And yeah, it's changed my behaviors in the sense that I'm a lot softer. I smile a lot more at people. I don't know. I'm the weird guy in LA that says hi to you when I walk in the street, because nobody says hi to you in LA, and that like smiles at people. I don't know. It's like I like love people. Like I'm not afraid of people. There's nothing. It's like, it's interesting. It's like, I didn't let go of like the pain in the sense that like I'm ignoring that pain is possible. But I'm allowing myself to acknowledge that all things are possible. And so like, it's like there's this just deep level of faith inside me that like I can just be fully present. And if pain happens, I can fucking handle it. Like I've been through it. And if love happens, that's great too. That just adds to the beautiful bliss that I've been experiencing.
Amazing.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, final question.
Sure.
Before we wrap up today, what role has forgiveness played in your healing?
Oh, this is a good one. These are great questions, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah, forgiveness has been beautiful. It's really like, like the classic trope, like you forgive people for yourself, not for them. That's somewhat true, but it's also, I think that the more truer statement would be you're forgiving people because you realize that there's no separation between you and that person. And, it's like my dad, he was one of my primary, abusers as a kid. And it's like, I hate the word abuser, because it's like automatically it's like, oh, he's the devil, he's the bad guy. But it's like, no, like I would have been him. I was him, like if I didn't have the tools that I have. He was just as much of an innocent boy that was like going through some very difficult things in Korea, especially back when Korea was like a poor third world, like war-torn country. And it's like, forgiveness, it helps, it like frees up space And the beauty behind it is like I'm able to connect with my father and like love my father, like love the man who he is and be proud of him, and almost be able to hold space for him and help like heal him. You know, I'll never say like I'm his healer, you know, because that's like kind of like, you know, saying that, hey, like it's my ego. No, I'm like, I'm able to hold space for him. And it's like, it's been wonderful because it's like, I see this generational, like seismic, like impact that's just expanding in our family. And, yeah, forgiveness, it only comes from really facing the deepest parts of yourself. You know, the word forgiveness, like, oh yeah, I forgive you. Those are hollow words, but forgiveness is an experience. It's a feeling. And you can't bypass feeling into that. You know, if I say I forgive you without actually feeling it, I'm transmitting the vibration of inauthenticity and pain into the world.
Yeah.
But if I forgive you and actually feel the full love, gratitude, and lightness that comes from forgiveness, then I'm transmitting true love and light into the world.
Yay. Thank you. Beautiful way to end this.
Yeah.
Yeah. Joe, it's been such a blessing, I would say, to have you along with me in this journey, and more conversations to come for sure.
Yeah. And it's been a blessing to have you as well. Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll catch you later. Hey everyone, I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for tuning in and supporting From the Ashes during this first season. I have loved every moment of producing this show, and I truly hope that these stories have inspired you to dig deeper into your own personal growth journeys. It's been an honor to share these conversations with you, and I can't wait to bring you more in November when we kick off season 2. Until then, stay awesome and keep rising.
Coffee shop.